Hi guys, my name is Ina and today we'll explore different ways of watering our orchids. If you're a beginner and just bought your first orchid, or maybe if you have a range of different orchids but you are not a very experienced grower and has some questions about watering, stay here with me. I will try to answer some of them. I will give you some tips and I'll let you know what I think is the best approach to water orchids when you're starting this journey. So, I will not talk only about Phalaenopsis orchids, that they are one of the most common orchids out there, like this beauty here with me. I will also talk about some other common orchids like Cattleyas, Oncidiums, and Dendrobium nobilis, because I think these ones are the ones that we tend to have outside our homes more often than other orchids. I might be wrong, maybe it's different in some other regions. I'll not cover all of the orchids here. It would be impossible. I don't have orchids, but I will cover this one. So enough blab. I talked a lot until now. Let's start talking about Phalaenopsis orchids, how I water them, what are my tips. And before I start, just to let you know, if you enjoy my video, hit the like button. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe to my channel. That's the best way to support me and to support this community to grow. Taking that out of the way, let's dive into these beauties here. So Phalaenopsis or moth orchids are these beauties that we find locally in our supermarkets, garden centers. You can find them for a very affordable prices in some regions here in Europe. And why they are so popular? Because they will produce a multitude of different flowers with different colors. Some of them are smaller, others larger, and on top of that, they can bloom for many months. But we're not talking about Phalaenopsis, so let's explore how to water something similar to what I have in here. The first thing that you have to know about Phalaenopsis is that they are monopodial, which means that they will grow one leaf after another leaf, and we'll have this sort of like a cup here with the leaves. When you look at them, not exactly a cup, but especially because we pot them upwards, so each will have like a funnel on these leaves. For this reason, we never water Phalaenopsis from above, because if we have water trapped among the leaves, it can create some infection. These infections, they are known as crown rot or stem rot, and they can kill your orchid. But in nature, it will rain, the water will get trapped among the leaves. However, they will be attached to trees and tree trunks and will be hanging like that. So the wind, and we also have different bacteria on the air, different microorganisms that will evaporate this water, that will react differently. So inside our homes, because we decided to pot them up like that, I'm not talking about orchids that we attach to trees, but just these ones that we pot upwards. We should avoid watering them from above, and if we do, we should definitely dry all the leaves and all the intersections here, all the little cavities, let's put it out that, among the leaves, so we don't leave any water trapped in there. Taking these out of the way, we shouldn't mist our orchid as well, because misting them inside our homes can be dangerous, so we might have some water trapped in there. That's also not a good choice. And also don't water with ice. Ice is a very cold water. These plants come from tropical countries and they are used to intermediate temperature water. Okay. We addressed that. Let's take these out of the way. You can definitely mist your orchids if you live in a very, very hot country. You know that your orchids will have a breeze all the time and it's extremely hot. Okay, but for most of us that lives inside a house that has intermediate temperature, let's follow some rules. And the first rule here is, so every time we water Phalaenopsis, we need to make sure that the roots are completely dry, the potting mix is completely dry between watering. These plants, they don't appreciate it being moist all the time, especially if they are potted in a very compact substrate. We can rot the root system and the roots can die. So in order to have healthy Phalaenopsis, it's very advisable that we look into the root system. How can we know if the root system is dry or moist? It's very simple. Just lift the pot, check the roots, and if they are grayish, whitish, it means that they are dry and they need their watering. If they are green, they are soaked, they are plumped, which means that they are hydrated. If they are dry, we need to water it. And how should we water this plant? Again, most Phalaenopsis will come potted up in bark. That's like these wood chips that we see on our orchid pots. Bark is very airy, so for this reason they are perfect for epiphyte orchids. So if your plant came up potted in bark, just add some water to the outer layer, to the outer pot, and let the inner pot soak in there for like 10 minutes or so. After 10 minutes, just come, remove the orchid from the outer pot, throw the water away, and your orchid is definitely watered. For how long should you keep your Phalaenopsis there? Maybe 1 week, maybe 10 days, depending on your environment. Here I tend to check all my pots every week. I know that they won't dry out in less than a week, maybe in the middle of my summer, which might happen once, but then my plants will be okay. Since I live in a country that tends to be cold most of the time, and the temperature inside my home is always around 20 degrees Celsius or 15, something like that, then my plants won't dry very fast. If you live in a hotter climate, you might have to look into your pot more than once a week. Other places, maybe each 2 weeks. Here, when it's winter, autumn, my Phalaenopsis will not dry every week. So again, depending on your climate, just check the root system, see if it's gray. If it is, offer it a good watering and throw this water away. Place it back on your shelving, on your windowsill, and your plant will be super happy. How to know if your Phalaenopsis is dehydrated? If you haven't watered for a while, you will notice. It's not something that you can forget about and they will simply survive. They will suffer. And some signs of dehydration is you notice that the roots can get wrinkled, you can have lumpy leaves, they will be leathery. All of these are signs of dehydration. Among others, I'll link some videos down below. But if you're a beginner, ideally have your Phalaenopsis potted in bark and soak it. It's the best way and the safest way for you to water, at least while you're getting to know your orchids. More than that, let's go to the next plant, because otherwise we will talk a lot about Phalaenopsis. Now let's talk about the Oncidiums or dancing ladies orchids. These beauties here, they are very popular as well. Their advantage is that although their blooms will not as long as Phalaenopsis flowers, they can bloom multiple times a year. They are super perfumey as well. Some Oncidiums smells like vanilla or chocolate. They can produce a branch full of tiny blooms. Some other intergeneric, we have larger blooms within different shapes. So Oncidiums are great, especially for people with intermediate temperature. They tend to do super well, but if you live in a very hot climate, you need to water these beauties a little bit more and a little bit more often. So here where I live, I can also find these plants in supermarkets and garden centers. They are pretty affordable. They are one of the most affordable orchids here, especially if they have spent their flowers already. You can find some that you don't know their blooms because they don't have any flowers, but you can rescue them and they are pretty resilient as well. So how will you water these beauties then? So they are a little bit more, I would say, thirsty than Phalaenopsis. They have very thin roots. To look at the root system, they are not as thick as some other orchids. And also they are monopodial, so they will produce many growths and they will have pseudobulbs. So these pseudobulbs can actually store water, which is great for the plants and for the plant's survival. However, because the roots are very thin and the leaves are thinner as well, it doesn't store as much water as Phalaenopsis and also struggled without water. It can get more stressed. For these reasons, these plants need a little bit more moist, I would say, and you need to keep an eye on them. I would advise you to water exactly like you water your Phalaenopsis if this plant came up potted out in bark, that these chips, these wood chips. However, you might find them potted in something thinner like cocoa peat or maybe a little bit of moss. Nonetheless, you can safely soak it and leave it hanging on your windowsill again. They need a little bit more light, but also I would advise you to put your finger inside the potting mix. It's not as easy to see the root system and to see if it's dry as the Phalaenopsis. So check the mix and see if it's approaching dryness. If it's a little bit moist, but it's mostly dry, offer it some water. You don't need to wait for these plants to be completely dry to water them, because if you do it, they will show signs of stress. They love to be moist most of the time, and they will benefit from it. If you don't know how to check if your Oncidium or your intergeneric is getting dehydrated, it's also pretty easy. Just look at the pseudobulbs. They will start to shrink, will have some wrinkles, and it's going to be pretty visible that they need a good watering. However, don't let your plant completely dry. Let's say you forgot. I don't know, something happens and life happens and we forget to water our plant, right? Then suddenly I get desperate and I will offer it a ton of water. That's not going to sort out the problem. Water only the water that these plants need. Soak it, throw it away, and place it on the shelving. Don't let it in water for longer, or don't let a lot of water trapped on the pot, because you can rot the root system. It's not because you let it dry for longer that you have to offer more water. Okay, that's just a pro tip. Let's go to the next orchid. The next orchids here are the Cattleyas. They are beauties. Again, they bloom multiple times a year. They have some fluffy and large flowers, sometimes smaller and waxy flowers. You can find Cattleyas within a wide variety of different colors and shapes. However, they are not as accessible as the other two orchids that I've just mentioned. At least where I live, there is no Cattleyas in supermarkets or garden centers. So if I want to buy Cattleyas, I need to go to orchid nurseries, specialist orchid nurseries. Then I can find them and I can buy them. I know that in some territories, some places, you can find Cattleyas around. Like I'm from Brazil, so I know that in Brazil there are Cattleyas in supermarkets from time to time. But that's not my case here in Europe. So depending where you are. But they are very popular orchids because the flowers are gorgeous. I don't have a Cattleya in bloom at the moment, so that's why, but this one is bad. I'm so excited. I haven't seen this one in bloom yet. Anyway, let's talk about how to water your Cattleya. So Cattleya are very drought-tolerant orchid. They will survive without watering for longer. They come from hot and tropical countries like the other orchids as well. However, usually in drier area, not every Cattleya, but most of the Cattleyas that we find around. So, as a tip for you to water your Cattleya, if it comes in bark like the other orchids that I mentioned, you do the same. You soak it for 10 minutes, you remove it from the water and you place it back in your shelving. But Cattleyas, you have to be very careful to not water them when they are still moist. If you live in a climate that has intermediate temperature, or it's like something like temperate climate, like where I live, that will range from cool to intermediate temperature, you need to wait for a Cattleya to dry out completely between watering. Otherwise, the root system will suffer and your Cattleya will become weaker. They will love to become completely dry and then to be watered again. That's what I learned with my own experience. That's different. If you live in a very hot climate, they will dry out quickly. Then you won't struggle as much. But if you have lots of moisture around, you need to offer to these plants lots of light, a bright space, and also a very airy mix. But most important, only water when the mix is dry. Again, don't overwater it. Don't let water trapped in the pot. Don't water too much. For any reason, I forgot to water it this week. I will not let water trapped, and these plants will suffer with it, and we can have root rot easily with Cattleyas. So they are very resilient. When they take off, they will do well, but remember to have the mix very dry in between watering. Their root system will also become some sort of dry. You can notice when you look at them, you see that they are whitish instead of green. And if they are whitish, means that they are dry. So you can also put your fingers on the mix and check to see if it needs some watering or not. More than that, they will do okay. Hopefully, you can place them back where it belonged, under your shelving or on your windowsill. Some signs of dehydration in Cattleyas is that just look to the leaves. You will notice that the leaves, they will become wrinkled because they are very thick, like Phalaenopsis leaves. So when they are dehydrated, it's pretty easy to notice. Something else is the pseudobulbs. These divisions here, if they become if they shrink and become wrinkled as well, that's another sign that your plant is dehydrated. But hopefully you won't notice these signs if we're watering them whenever they need their water. So just keep an eye on the mix system. Let's go to the last but not least, Dendrobium nobile orchids. Okie dokie, I have this beast here. It's massive nobile. These tend to get very tall and kind of messy plants. But when they are in bloom, they put quite a show. So these are very popular plants everywhere I've been. Here in Europe, in Brazil, I can see them in supermarkets, garden centers. They are popular, and the good thing about them, they can be cheap and affordable as well, and lots of us have these on our homes. So if we're growing them potted like the other plants, usually for us to water them, we do the same thing that we do with other orchids. We just soak them on our potting mix for 10 to 15 minutes and we place them back. However, these plants, they have a very particular type of growth. So they will mature the new growths during the season that's the warmer season. And they have to grow very fast. So they would tend to need more water during spring and summer. So we might need to water them a little bit more often than we water some of our other orchids, depending on our climate. So during the warmer season, it was safe to fertilize and water these plants more often. Just look at the root system, but mainly place your fingers on the potting mix. The roots are thin as well, not as thinner as Oncidium roots, but they are very thin. So it's not as easy to look at the roots and notice if they need water, but put your fingers, if they are approaching dryness, you can definitely water them. They will appreciate it, and they hopefully will grow nicely. The only thing, the caveat with these plants, the difference is when it comes to autumn to winter, especially the colder months. They will need a dry season to be able to rebloom. And that's very specific to these plants. So when the temperature drops, they will go into a phase where they are not going to be growing or producing roots. And you don't need to water them or water them as often as you used to. Usually because I live in a cold country, I can keep these plants for 2 months with zero water and they won't struggle. However, if you live maybe in a warmer month, these plants are not going to be able to rebloom for you, so I'm not sure if they are the right plants for you. So just keep an eye during the drier months on the pseudobulbs and see if they are becoming very, very wrinkled. If this happens suddenly, it means that these plants need some water. But generally speaking, when you look at them during the drier period, you can definitely leave them there hanging without any water, and they should survive and they will be able to rebloom. When you notice that these plants have the first buds appearing, then it's time for you to start introducing some water to their rooting. Just to let you know, I have a very detailed video about Dendrobium nobilis and about other orchids. I'll link all of them down below. You will find more information, and also we have some longer videos where I talk about how to grow all of these orchids. This video here was just an introduction for beginners about how to water them, and I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit the like button, as I said before. Leave a comment down below letting me know which type of orchids you have inside your home, if you struggle with some of them. And I'd love to hear more from you. And I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.